Previously on the Stereo 999 YouTube channel.
The thing about this record was, among record collector circles, there had been a rumor that Richie Blackmore plays on this thing, which turned out to be debunked.
This is indeed a disturbing universe.
Hello, greetings and welcome. Welcome to the Stereo 999 YouTube channel. I'm your host, the artist formerly known as Stereo Steve, and I am waiting for the bus again. Yes, I do take a lot of public transportation. I'm going to the SF Museum of Modern Art because they're actually having a record fair there. I don't know if I'm getting any good material or not, but we'll find out.
A few minutes later.
Okay, we're rolling up on it. Yeah. All right. Let's get my own compartment here. All right. I haven't been to a record fair in a while. It's a pretty nice setup here. All right. Let's see what we got here. Herb Albert. I'm not even gonna ask. Yeah, this is funny. I was talking about this last week about how this record, there was a rumor that Richie Blackmore played on it, and there's a bootleg of it where it actually says on the hype, Deep Purple members. Wait, there's more. There's like 3 different rooms full of records. This is the second one. Oh, I've heard of them. That's one of those English groups. All right. Now to ascend the stairs to the next level. And we're up 2 flights of stairs. We're at the next level here. Oh, hey, I know this guy. How's it going, man? So this is where, you film yourself flipping through the records. And then when somebody's watching it and they're like, oh, wait, you passed that one up. All revering the Raiders. Miranda Morris, who's been putting on these KOSF Rock and Swaps for how many years?
This is Rock and Swap's 40-something year. Hold on.
83 they started? Something like that? Ooh. God, I remember when I was a wee lad when they had them at the Kabuki before it was a movie theater. I went to one of those.
Yes.
Those were the 1983 Rock and Swaps.
Actually, I've been in contact with Kate Ingram. If anybody remembers Kate. And
I do. She was program coordinator in the 90s.
Yes.
For the radio station.
Contacted me recently and given me a little bit more of the history of when she was there and it started, and how it was at Kabuki and then it came to the campus a couple of years later. But the good news is that all the money from the Rock and Swaps still goes to the student station.
That's good.
So to keep it going. That's
good.
As we're going through budget cuts, we still have some money coming in from the Rock and Swaps.
That's good. Because that's kind of the elephant in the room, is like after the 2011 restructuring and splitting off of the station into 2 different stations, that you kind of single-handedly managed to still keep the swaps going.
I have a lot of students who help me do this. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for the students, so I'll put it to you that way.
That's awesome. That's really good that they're still enthusiastic and still involved in this.
Yeah, well, they have to volunteer at the Rock and Swap before they get an online radio show.
That's good. So how is the online station doing?
You know, it's good. We definitely do not have as many listeners as we did when we were FM, but you know, it's the only good thing I can see about it is that it is more accessible to learn how to DJ and get a radio show, and not have to learn all the FM stuff.
All the
But
FCC stuff.
yeah, and you know, there's so many other online radio stations now that it's not. You know, back when it happened in 2011, people are like, "Oh, you're not a real radio station," and the
Right.
students who had no idea about the sale were like, you know, like. So now I feel like 10 years later, it feels more confident for them to be like running an online radio station. The technology is better. You know, but no, we would, if anybody wants to give us $4 million to buy another signal, we'd happily accept your donation.
I had to pay bills, otherwise I'd help you.
Yeah.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What are you gonna do with that? I don't want to.
Hey, I'm in the big city. Mr. Gopher in the big city. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What are you gonna do with that? I don't want to be
It's,
blasted on
I'm
the
gonna
internet.
I'm gonna probably put some kind of weird special effects on it and put it on YouTube
Oh God. Okay.
Saturday.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm back. I'm back from the Sfmoma KOSF Rock and Swap Record Fair, and I got a few things. I got a lot of cheap stuff. Maybe a couple things that were a little more pricey, but I got some cheap stuff. Like, Mr. Jaws, why are you grabbing my hand? Wouldn't you give your hand to a friend? And Melissa Manchester's greatest hits. Strauss greatest hits. These were like a quarter. There's this guy from KFJC, and he was selling, he had a few records and a bunch of CDs that were like a quarter each. I don't know what any of these are, but probably like the KOSF music meeting, just stuff they got sent. But yeah, this one looks like a compilation. Slicing Grandpa. Slicing Grandpa I've heard of, because I think there's a Noise Pancakes connection with them. And Mozart, the odd one out. Okay, let's see, what else? Corla Pandit. He was lounge music pipe organ player. There was kind of interesting story with him that he was African American, but he kind of marketed himself as Indian. And this is one of those fantasy pressings from the 50s where they made the stereo pressings on blue vinyl. They made the mono pressings on red vinyl. This was actually kind of a holy grail for me, this Dave Brubeck and Cal Tjader album. It was kind of hard to find, and that was cheap. I've been on a quest to find a perfect copy of Inagata Devita, and this one still has this shrink wrap, so it might be a little closer to that. We'll find out. Also in the psychedelic vein, New Improved Blue Cheer, one of the few Blue Cheer records that I didn't have, even though I have a Best of Blue Cheer that has the best song on this, Peace of Mind. But yeah, this is the one that has Randy Holden on guitar. Something I used to have, and now I have it again. And this is my advice: keep everything, because you'll end up buying back stuff you used to have. Right? Keep everything, right? This is the Raincoats Moving. This is their third album, and it's a little more refined, a little more pop than their first album. And somebody sent me a cassette tape of this back in the 80s, and I haven't heard it since then. The Crystal Set, kind of a new wave pop kind of band from Australia, 1987. Again, it would be interesting. It'll be interesting to hear this again. One of my favorite funk bands, BT Express. This was just a buck. I think it's their first album, Non-Stop. I had the other album, the Do It Till You're Satisfied. That was kind of their hit. But, dude, funky, funky, funk. All right. Best of Charles Lloyd. And it's got the whole Forest Flower on the first side. And, yeah. Jack D. Jeanette on drums. Cecil McBee. I thought Keith Jarrett played on this. Maybe I'm wrong. This is another one I used to have. This was pretty cheap, so I don't know how condition-wise it is. But this is the Kinks live album from 1980. One for the Road. And this was a buck, and the seller recommended it to me. I'd never heard of these guys, called Splinter. But George Harrison is all over this record. Produced it and plays a lot of guitar on it. And it's on his Dark Horse label. And the last one, this is a record I always see for $1, and it's always destroyed. And it's Laura Nyro, Gonna Take a Miracle. And this was for $1 and in good shape. And she was singer-songwriter, kind of introspective. A lot of her songs in the 60s were covered and were hits for like the Fifth Dimension and Three Dog Night. But this was her soul album where she performs with LaBelle. So this should be funky. All right. So that is what I amused myself with at the Consumer Frenzy. Peace.
All right, well, I spent the day hanging out with Mr. Gopher and listening to these records that I got. So, what are my thoughts now? Let's see. So yeah, Charles Lloyd, Best of Charles Lloyd. He played tenor sax and flute around late 60s, early 70s. Kind of psychedelic jazz, maybe you could call him. Forest Flower is like one of his best albums, and this Best of Charles Lloyd has the entire first side of Forest Flower as its first side. Charles playing tenor sax and flute, Keith Jarrett on piano, Cecil McBee on bass, and Jack DeJohnette on drums for most of this. This is, again, one of those records I used to have. This is the Kinks One for the Road live album from 1980. And I listened to it again for the first time in years, and it's pretty interesting. It's like a lot of their classic old songs kind of retrofitted for arena rock, because that's kind of the venues they were playing around this time. Their album Low Budget was a big hit, and their next big hit record, Give the People What They Want, was right after this. So yeah, that kind of early 80s heavy sounding Kinks, but playing some of their classic songs. The version of 20th Century Man is really good on this, I think. Okay, BT Express. I had their other album, Do It Till You're Satisfied, and then I saw Cosmic Brian show this, and I'm like, yeah, BT Express, and this was for $1. It has like a little warp in it, but it plays. You know, I was watching some other video where somebody was like making a big bugaboo out of a warped record that was barely warped at all, but none of them are as warped as my mind, baby. But anyway, this is like the pre-disco hard funk, and they're just killing it. You know, just great grooves. You know, the grooves are really what stand out, you know. And they're from Brooklyn. And the second side starts out with like a slow jam of the Carpenters, Close to You, done in a 70s soul style. This one I was talking about how somebody sent me a cassette tape of this album, but with not a whole lot of information. But I listened to this again. I like the way this cover is reflecting. But I was listening to this and I was going, wow, this kind of sounds like The Church. And they're Australian, and I looked up online. This was Stephen Kilby's brother's band in like 1986, the Crystal Set. And this is definitely worth checking out if you get a chance to hear this. From Now On by the Crystal Set. Alright. And if you might remember a video that I did a month ago where I was talking about records that it took me the longest amount of time to find, where I had the, you know, the Mexicali Baby 45 and the Count Basie record and all this kind of childhood stuff. Well, this was another grail I was kind of looking for. This was just sitting there in somebody's bargain bin at that record fair. But it's Dave Brubeck and Cal Jader. It's, you know, pre-timeout. That didn't happen until after he was signed to Columbia. So this is early. But, yeah, really interesting piano explorations with some vibes, with some percussion. This raincoat's moving. I remember when I first heard this, I was a little bit baffled by how polished it was compared to their other records. You know, this was around the same time they had that single, No One's Little Girl, I think in 1984. But this is an original Rough Trade copy, and the way you can tell it's an original is the song Honey Mad Woman. On later copies of this, they replaced that song with No One's Little Girl, which was a single. Ahead of their time, all-female band from the 80s. And this was a quarter, and, you know, it's Strauss. I mean, I already have the 2001 soundtrack, so I have the Blue Danube, but you never know when you're going to want to waltz. It's Laura Nyro. This was pretty cool. I mean, she's mostly known as a singer-songwriter, but there's a lot of covers on this album. Like I said, this is her soul album that she did with LaBelle. Was it Spanish Harlem? Jimmy Mack, Nowhere to Run, and Dancing in the Street. And you know, maybe you've heard me say this before about how that song Dancing in the Street is cursed, because the Kinks version of it, the Who's version of it, the Dead's version of it, Bowie and Mick Jagger's version of it, all terrible. Nobody can really do a decent cover of that song. But this version is pretty good. She doesn't do that too bad. New Improved Blue Cheer. It's their third album. You know, the general consensus is that this is, you know, it's not as heavy. It's not the pre-metal heaviness of the first two albums, because the first side has these kind of short, basic rock songs with this piano on it. But the real crown jewel of this record is the second side, where Randy Holden on guitar just takes off. And, you know, it's two long tracks. Peace of Mind, which is just epic. It starts slow and just, it's almost an anthem. And then Fruit and Icebergs, which he later redid on his Population 2 album. But, yeah. Listen to side 2 first, because that's really the killer side of this album. Okay, so this Splinter, what does it say here? Produced by George Harrison and Harry Georgeson, he lists himself. I mean, these guys just sing, and there's like an all-star cast of players, you know, Gary Wright, Klaus Voormann, George Harrison, Mel Collins on horn, who played with King Crimson. How would I describe this? It's like slow Badfinger songs. Yeah, if you're a Beatles nerd and you want some weird Beatles related thing that not a whole lot of people know about. And this is, I mean, this cost me $1, so this is, don't pay big bucks for this, but if you see it and it's cheap and George is your favorite Beatle, get this. And last but not least, a guilty pleasure, Melissa Manchester. You know, Midnight Blue. I really like that song, unironically. Because wouldn't you give your hand to it, friend? Don't cry out loud.
Oh, show and tell. It's just a game I play when I want to show you some records. So like and subscribe, and you'll see them next time.